Namaskar, guys. I'm Neil, and I welcome all of you to the GS4, our ethics Sherlocking module. This is going to be the first session, but as I discussed in the recent post I put on the group, we are not going to take up a linear timeline in giving ourselves the best shot. Now, what does linearity mean here? Why am I starting off with what I'm starting off with? We'll answer these two questions at the outset, and then we'll start off with the task at hand. Linearity basically means that ideally, in an ideal world, I will explain the syllabus to you. After I explain the syllabus, I will map the previous year questions based on those syllabus pointers. Then we will try to find out the source to get enough content so that we can address those P by Qs well, as far as the content angle is concerned. And then we can write some previous year questions ourselves to see if we have the right mix of intuition and content. But I'm throwing that paradigm out the window because time is of essence right now. Doesn't mean that we're not going to come to those steps. We're going to come to those steps. Those steps are not step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, step number 4 for us anymore. These steps are now step 2, step 3, step 4 respectively for us. Why is that? Because at this point in time, I want us to be ruthless. I have learned it experientially that in the end, the examiner would not care about how much you know, because there is no objective barometer of knowing what and how much you know. The only thing that will reflect your knowledge to the examiner is what? Is your copy which is in front of the evaluator. So if we can somehow, write well enough in that script in those 3 hours, the script that is going to be evaluated in 15 minutes, then, how do we write in a way that it shows to the examiner that I know a lot, is what our problem statement is at this point in time. And rather than doing it the harder way, doing the harder grind at this point in time, a grind which might or might not have potential returns, I present to you a way in which we will show you the end game on day 0, so that now when we start looking at the syllabus, now when we start mapping the previous questions to those syllabus keywords, now when we look at the content that we need to read, so on and so forth, we know that what is the end game we are aiming at. If you have sight at that end game right from the word go, you will never be beaten. Whatever little you could read, you'd be able to use that content to your advantage. And that is what I meant when I said that we're going to follow a non-linear timeline. So let's, after having discussed the plan of action, now it is time for us to start with the first copy. This is my own copy. I wrote this a month before I wrote the actual mains. I scored to 121 this year, which is a great score in 2022. And this copy is a fair reflection of how I wrote what I wrote in the examination hall. My agenda of discussing a copy, maybe moving forward in GS 1, 2, 3, it could be my copy, it could be someone else's copy. That is redundant to me. What is important is that we need to set the agenda very clearly. The first agenda is to start giving you a glimpse of what is it that we need to accomplish in the end. So, end game. Looking at the end game. And the second agenda is for you to come back to it. Come back to this video after you've seen the rest of the videos to see how to scavenge, how to get the max, out of toppers copies. To be honest, I think it is only because of the MBIization of this exam that we call these copies toppers copies. There is only one topper in any exam. And the rest of the people are successful aspirants. But it is what it is. But this really irks me, and that is why I wanted to say it out loud. I never call these toppers copies. I always call them successful aspirants copies. But, it is what it is. So knowing, how to read those copies and how to gain the maximum out of them is really important to start. Rather than going for content enrichment from random sources, I feel that looking at these copies is a much more rewarding exercise. So our agenda is to first show you the end game and then give you the process of how to scavenge, how to read through these copies. Because if I give you the process, my time is limited. So I can do one of two things. I can either scavenge these copies myself, and I can at max scavenge 4 to 10 copies, and I can give you the content I scavenge out of it. The more difficult, so it will be easier for me because very quickly in the back end, I can make the video, I can scavenge on my own time, and then I can give you the content. And to give you the content, I might not even need to make the videos. I might just give you the content in PDF format, but it would not add as much value to your life as the case, as a current case in which I'll show you how to. I will show you the process. As I said, this course is a process oriented module. Anyone can give you the content. People are anyway giving you the content. It is to make you independent. It is to teach you the process of how to reduce dependence on everyone, on most of the people out there. So let's start, with that thought. Now that you and I are on the same page, let's start with question number one. When I'm scavenging the content, when I'm looking at the end game, I don't care at this point in time about the question in my first reading. In your first reading of any copy, you should not care about the question. You should just care for the structure, the overarching framework. Otherwise, you're going to make this very, very difficult for yourself. So in the first reading, what do you need to do? Just look at structure and takeaways, right? And I will tell you, how to look at the takeaways, right? I don't care what is the question. I'll just look at things that I can take for myself. I look at the definition. I look at the structure first of all. I'll see that, the moment I look at the question. So answer the ingredient, and I'm going to make a very separate series, which is inclusive in the course of the art of answer writing. A good answer is the one that once you read the answer, you don't need to look at the question. The answer gives the way to the way question would have been framed in the back end. Right? To understand, I will repeat myself. A good answer is such that you don't need to go back to to look at the question again. The answer should have been written in a way that it follows the same flow that would have otherwise been given in the question. So I look at the answer and see that someone has written an introduction and maybe looks like this is a prelude. Just bear with me, since we're following a non-linear structure, some of these things might sound confusing to you, but as and how we move forward, everything's going to tie around well. Let me assure you. So just enjoy this ride for some time. Start to absorb whatever is being taught, and after you watch 4 or 5 of these videos, everything will become more and more clear. And if you ever have any doubts, we are anyway going to meet every couple of weeks, so I'll be open to those queries. So it looks as if this is the introduction, and this is the prelude, and maybe this is the head, then maybe some points in the head, and finally a conclusion. This is about the structure. Looks like a good structure to me, right? So let me read and see what I can extract. I'll use highlighter. Maybe the question is about ethical governance, is about managing a country's resources with a value system to aid people's people's development. So my takeaway here is very simple. So I'm not going to explicitly make a note of the content because the content becomes redundant. Maybe the next time the topic, the theme might change. Can I pick something from this introduction in a way that I can retrofit in n number of themes? That is my my mindset at that point in time. So I see that I've written ethical governance. So governance is a topic from GS2. Ethical is a topic from GS4. So it's a combination. This keyword is a combination of GS4 and GS2. What has this person done is they have this person has tried to address both the aspects to certain keywords. So they use a keyword from GS2, from governance, managing a country's resources. Maybe this is what governance is about, with a value system, with a keyword from GS4. And that is how you make a new definition out of thin air, right? So that is how you use common sense. So what is my takeaway here? You pay close attention to the theme from which that keyword is being formed. And then to create a definition, you make individualized keywords. You take individualized keywords from those two different contexts and you put them together. What is ethics? Ethics equals value system for a layman. Ethics equals value system. Governance is about managing a country's resources. So to make a definition about ethical governance, you combine those two together. You say managing a country's resources with a value system to aid people's development. This is what the management of the country's resources is about. So you create introduction out of thin air. You don't need a book wherein you will see a well laid down definition for all these keywords, because for one such book does not exist, and two, if this book were to exist, hypothetically, if it were to exist, you would not ever be able to go through the entirety of it, ever. Right? So this is my takeaway. So initially we're going to go a little slow, and I hope by the time we go to question number 4 or question number 5, we pick up pace, because then you'd be up to speed on all the on the entirety of the basic framework. So the introduction is clear. What is our takeaway from introduction? The process is very important. I would repeat. Anybody, a lot of people are giving you a lot of content. None of my concern. It is all about giving you the process that can make you independent, so that you can make your own definitions on the go. Now, welfare state traits. What are the traits of a welfare state? You see that this person is also using multicolored pens. This improves presentation. This improves visibility. Welfare state points: inclusivity, equity, compassion, redistribution of wealth. So this is socialism. We know socialism is related to welfare. Inclusivity, again, a generic keyword which can be used anywhere. Equity, again, can be used anywhere. Compassion has been taken from the keywords, from the syllabus keyword of GS4, right? So you use these generic keywords and you combine them together so as to, make a framework which sounds very relevant to the context which is asked. Even if, it was about good governance traits, you can always use inclusivity, you can always use equity. The context can change. These points would remain the same. So I will highlight these keywords, because I know I can use these keywords readily in any context. As far as the question on ethics is concerned, inclusivity, equity, I will very, slowly try to enrich my vocabulary. And that is why I think, uh, content bombardment does not help. If I give you 200 pages or even 50 pages worth of content, this vocabulary all at once, and if I do not teach you how to use these in an actual answer, it will not at all be relevant at all. A lot of people, they learn this trick. I won't call it a trick, this process the hard way, because the market will only give you the content. My job, again, I would repeat, is not to give you the content, but to enable you to use that content in the best, in the most optimized way possible. I'll make a note of inclusivity, equity, compassion, and redistribution of wealth. So I will not make a note of what? I will not make a note of compassion, because compassion I will anyways be able to extract from the syllabus keyword. And redistribution of wealth flows from the context. Context or welfare. Now the context can change. When the context changes, one additional keyword can always be created based on the context. When you have the context of welfare, welfare equals redistribution of wealth. That is how the taxation works. You tax people who are well off enough to be taxed, and then you redistribute it in form of welfare schemes, so that people who are at the bottom of the pyramid are, enabled for better opportunities moving forward. And then, that is what I mean when I tell you to give a context, to avoid mind map like presentation. If I don't give you the context, then this is nothing. This is empty. This is mind map like presentation. To give this a conventional asset, I feel I will just give a very crisp, very crisp discussion, not even discussion, very crisp preface to the context I'm speaking about. Inclusivity for one and all. Equity to provide equal opportunities. Compassion towards downtrodden, and and uh, uh, redistribution of wealth with the trusteeship doctrine. To understand this, so what am I doing here? I am contextualizing. This is called contextualization. So with practice, contextualization will become easy. And that is why I wanted to do this exercise right from the word go. If we do this exercise in the end, you will have to come back to your content again, read through it again, and so that you can contextualize it. But now, if right from the word go, acha, right, this is what I have to do. Now when you go read the content, now when we map the syllabus keywords, we know the end game in mind, that we need to use keywords, we need to use our common sense to create introductions and to generate body points. This is how common sense, is my driver to generate this point. Common sense was my driver to generate the introduction. And contextualization comes with practice. But now you know how do you contextualize. Inclusivity for one and all, equity to provide equal opportunities. All of this is commonsensical. Which book do you need to read this? Compassion towards downtrodden and needy, and redistribution of wealth with the trusteeship doctrine. Right? I will make a note of this too. Trusteeship doctrine can be used in a number of ways. Wherever you have compassion being spoken about. So now you see, the beauty is you can swap these points between themselves and the content would still remain the same. You can say that, compassion with the trusteeship doctrine, redistribution of wealth to enable downtrodden and needy. Right? Once you have a bouquet of ready-made points and once you know how to contextualize, the relative position of these points cease to matter. It's just that you don't have to repeat them verbatim. Are you understanding the beauty? That is why I say answer writing is an art, and that is why I'm taking a lot of time at the outset. Right? Then this person writes about ways and means to promote ethics and governance, compliance approach. So again, this is very generic, can be used anywhere. Compliance approach. What is compliance approach? It is like, the stick approach. It is like the stick approach. You ensure that people are complying. So compliance means ensuring enforcement. And then you give some examples to show that, this again is contextualization, using examples, using expanding whatever you're talking about. Both of these are, come under the subcategorization of contextualization. So this is contextualization. Examples are contextualization, and everybody knows about, these acts. So you don't need to categorically go back and read these acts in detail. You just need to know that, acha, these acts exist, and this is how I'm going to contextualize. So I will repeat this over and over again unless my voice becomes the voice inside your head, which keeps on telling you that you just need common sense, belief, and you need practice of contextualization. Otherwise, it won't happen overnight. Despite having the entire content in the back of your head, you would still not be able to write good answers. This is how you extract the maximum out of these copies. So compliance approach, I'll highlight this. And I'll keep coming back to this copy. And the next time I come to this copy, I'll just read the highlighted content. I will read compliance approach, enforcement. Then integrity approach. This is another approach. Probably, this person read this somewhere, but now I don't need to go back and read this source. I have read this copy for all practical purposes. This is my tool now. I can use this freely in a number of contexts. Whenever there's a question, the question might change, the context might change, but the content would remain the same. If there was a question on how will you incentivize, how will you ensure that probity in governance is improved? Now, question has completely changed. Question has completely changed, but again, the content remains the same. You will write the same point, compliance approach. You will write the same point, integrity approach. What is integrity approach? You incentivize ethical norms. Now, this is contextualization via awards recognition. Contextualization always helps. Without contextualization, everything is just empty words. For instance, somebody tells you that, how will you improve the policing? How will you improve the policing? And you say that I will increase the intake. Now, this is empty word. This is an empty word essentially. Everybody knows you need to increase the staff, but how will you increase the staff? Or if you were to not increase the staff, how will you use the same level of workforce to ensure that they improve the productivity of the staffs on ground? That one line in the end is worth its weight in gold. That is called contextualization. I would repeat it over and over again. The sooner you, understand the utilization of contextualization, the more, you would, the better your chances would be of writing a good answer. Next is emphasis on COC, COI. I won't make a note of this point. I won't highlight this. Why? Because this point has directly been lifted from the syllabus keyword. And that is why I say you need to remember the syllabus. Don't worry, I will help you remember the syllabus in its entirety through mind maps, through mnemonics, through keywords. So this is my job to give you that starting point. But if you remember the syllabus, most of your points can easily be generated from those syllabus key points. And then you contextualize code of conduct and code of ethics to work as a minimum ethical standard and aspiration respectively. This person has not written anything extraordinary. This person has just contextualized the definition of COC and COE here. What is COC? COC is the minimum ethical standard, and COE is an aspirational level of ethical conduct. So I won't make a note of this. This is just, standard theoretical material. But now I know that I can contextualize that standard material from the syllabus directly in a question. Number 4, development of suitable attitude in public servants via sensitivity training. Again, see, so I won't make a note of this. This, I will make a note of the contextualization. Again, attitude is a keyword in the syllabus. So again, this person is now directly lifting keywords from the syllabus because this person remembers the syllabus. Development of suitable attitude in public servants. Now, this is where contextualization becomes important. So wherever there's a question on attitude, the context can change. The content would remain the same. You can always contextualize a point on attitude with the point on sensitivity training. It's very easy to say that you need to change someone's attitude. How do you change their attitude? You say that you can use ethos, pathos, logos. That is the domain of your content. Depends on how well you have read. But you can very easily, replace that by saying that I will sensitize, I will train them, I will put them under a sensitivity training, and this brings a certain level of contextualization. That is why I'll make a note of this. I'll just highlight this. So next time I use a question on attitude, maybe the question would change. I can use the same contextualization. Number 5, focus on living university and role modeling by ethical senior functionaries. So again, this is again a generic point, role modeling or role modeling living university concept, senior functionaries can remain the same. If there's a question on corporate governance, I will use the same point. I will use the same point, but then contextualization would change. Contextualization would be the examples. Here we are speaking about public services. So then we'll speak about individuals who are eminent individuals as far as public services are concerned. If we speak about corporate governance, I will write the examples. I will write names, a couple of names who are well known for their corporate governance practices like Ratan Tata ji and so on and so forth. Right? So you just need to, again, similar to prelims, you just need to have a bird's eye view. The difference in prelims and mains comes in terms of how exhaustive your practice has to be. And practice has to be top notch, has to be really exhaustive in mains. Everybody knows this. Right? It's a matter of putting those thoughts, those ideas on paper over and over again and reducing the amount of time you take to contextualize it. And it is only going to reduce with time. There is no shortcut here. Right? So the examples might change if the context changes, but the content, by and large, the point would remain the same, even if a different question were to be asked. And that is how, you generate a standard framework. After you go through 10 or 12 or 15 such copies in this manner, right? You give yourself that framework. I will only discuss this one copy with you. And maybe I might give you content moving forward from some of the copies that I will scavenge. But I will ensure that by the end of the discussion, this discussion on this copy, I would have given you all the tools on how to generate these points yourself sitting in the examination hall. And then, we'll come back to step number 1 now. Step number 2 rather, wherein we read through the syllabus, then we'll map the previous questions and then we'll take it up from there. Let's see the conclusion. Conclusion says ethics and governance, maybe this would have been the context, will ensure. So then this person, says that theme, what is the outcome of the theme? So this is my another structure for conclusion. Theme, what is the outcome? Maybe the context was, ethics and governance. But then this person is concluding with the idea as to what if we reach what we intend to reach. Ethics and governance will ensure that a subject transforms to an empowered citizen. So it's an outcome-oriented, conclusion, which leaves one with a food for thought that yes, we need to accomplish what is said, so that we know what will happen at the end of it. So again, this is generic and can be used in any number of ways. Generic doesn't mean bad. I don't know why nowadays we feel that generic is bad. I think generic is good because generic gives you that leeway to, use the same content in a lot of different contexts. Of course, if you have contextualization tools, if you have specific examples, that will lend more credibility to your argument. But there has to be an argument in the first place, right? And generic thought process, generic points give you that leeway to generate a lot of points. So ethics and governance will ensure that subject transforms to an empowered citizen. You can use this point in a number of ways, whether it is about ethics in governance, whether it is about probity in governance, whether it is about improving the service delivery, quality of service delivery, whether it is about empowering the citizen through citizen-centric governance. The context can keep on changing, but this point can be used. You can with the guarantee can use it in the ethics paper in at least one conclusion in 2023. I assure you. Right? This is the whole point of analyzing these copies. Not to say that this person has written well, this person has written good. You're not an evaluator at that point in time. Your job is to give yourself the best shot. So see, how long did we take to analyze this one single question? But now I think your neural networks will start to get trained on how to analyze any given topos copy. All right. Let's come to the next question. Again, when I'm reading this for the first time, ideally I won't care for the question, but still, let's read this so that when you come back to it again, after having watched the rest of the videos, you have more context. Question was, while one group considers abortion as unmitigated evil, the other sees it as morally acceptable. Analyze various ethical concerns. Analysis of various ethical concerns. This is called a prelude. So I'll speak about prelude in detail later, but then think of prelude as something, as someone says before, prelude is like beating around the bush before you come to the main course. Prelude is the starter. But again, given that you have a prelude to start off with, you have to show due respect to the examiner. And how do you show due respect? You acknowledge the prelude. Without the acknowledgement of prelude, it seems as if this prelude might not have been there in the first place. Ideally, if the prelude was absent, it says analyze various ethical concerns related to abortion and give your opinion on the issue. If you do not handle the prelude, if you do not express the correlation of abortion as an unmitigated evil or whether it is morally acceptable in the introduction, near the introduction, it would feel as if you've not read the question properly. So again, we speak about this definition of justice. Not only justice has to be dispensed, justice should also be seen to be dispensed. So prelude at least should be handled right around the introduction. Right? So this person writes, abortion is about premature termination of pregnancy in a voluntary manner. It is all about contextualization. Right? Nobody reads the textbook definition of abortion in a book. Then you say, what is abortion? Abortion is actually, abortion is about ending pregnancy. As and how you improve, you give yourselves better, more formal vocabulary. Ending means termination, and it is premature termination. So don't be worried if you can't pick up the vocabulary right from the word go, but just have the zeal to improve that. I want to use more. I want to use formal, better language. And if you have that zeal, sooner or later you'll try to you pick these keywords from these successful aspirants copies. So this was a definition which was generated ad hoc. Nobody reads this in a book. But how do you generate it in an ad hoc manner is the real task. It is about premature termination of pregnancy. Again, now this is additional contextualization in a voluntary manner. Doesn't add any value. If this was absent, the world would not end. But when you contextualize it, when you look at all the possible dimensions, it brings more credibility, more gravitas to your argument. And nobody teaches you this in a book. The more aware you are of your surroundings, the more common sense you employ, the better your introduction is going to be. I don't think you can ever get to a place wherein you can remember all of these things, the definition from a standard book. And I think it would look so dry. When you can use your common sense, the best operating system that is out there, why not use it? So this is how introductions are generated. Now you can start to see this similarity in the way introductions are generated. This person has not memorized a lot of introductions. This person is just able to use common sense and connect the context with, with the demand of the question. And then, this is a way to use and to, acknowledge the prelude. Prelude says, so context was abortion. Prelude 1 was unmitigated evil. Prelude 2 was morally acceptable. And then, this was contextualization. So what do I gain out of it? I say that now my very, standard generic way of generating or handling prelude is that theme. Oh, wait. So you see a framework now being followed. Once you start to see patterns is when it becomes fun and it becomes easy. Now, what is the standard framework this person is using? Theme, Contextualization, contextualize, and prelude. You'll see this theme repeating over and over again, over and over again. What has this person written? Abortion. This was prelude one, unmitigated evil. This was called, why is it called unmitigated evil? Because it takes away the unborn life, right? And how do you generate these points? How do you contextualize at pace? By practice. There is no shortcut. Initially, when I was trying to contextualize, I would take a lot of time. But after a lot of practice, all of it, the entire process could be automated. And it is sometimes seen as morally acceptable because it is in line with bodily autonomy. Nobody can teach you these points. You have to use common sense. But once you have a framework in place, a framework that you don't even need to invent at this point in time, you just go look at 15, 20, successful aspirants copies, and you'd have enough fodder on contextualization, right? Ethical concerns. Question was, what are the ethical concerns? Now, since, this has spoken about bodily autonomy, autonomy is about choice. So the first point flows from this commonsensically, pro-choice versus pro-life, pro-choice versus pro-life, right? Even an unborn fetus has a life, thus cannot be taken away on someone else's private whim. On the other hand, the fetus didn't come into being on its own accord. The mother, until she gives birth, can decide to either bring the life to this world or not based on her choice. You see that all of this is just explanation. The real crux lies in being able to generate this. And how do you generate this? By using common sense again. Probably it was Roe versus Wade judgment that might have, been the inspiration behind this question. So if you're reading newspapers, that's why I think the best, fodder content generator is either the copies of the successful aspirants or reading newspapers. In a lot of editorials, you'd see this argument being made: pro-life versus pro-choice. That is the only thing you'd have to remember. The rest flows from that, keyword. And that is why I say, when you're making your notes, when you're approaching reading a topic, you should only focus on extracting the keywords. If you could remember keywords somehow, you would be able to generate the entire story sitting in the examination hall. Such is the beauty of our mind. But keywords, it cannot generate itself. With practice, it will. But initially, you will need to feed it some data. Even, artificial intelligence is not entirely generative. It needs to be fed some data initially, and then later, AI becomes generative. What is the next point? Promotes unprotected premarital act of coitus. So this person has just, written a simple, simple act in a fancy language, and this will only come with practice. Unprotected premarital act of coitus. Conservative people believe this is against religion. By having a choice to abort, people have more fail-safe to engage in the act. Maybe, watching Big Bang Theory could have been the, inspiration for this term. So you also, funny as it may sound, you need to use whatever tools you have in your arsenal. If you watched a show somewhere and there's a term that you can pick up from that show, use it. Absolutely use it. You need to use whatever, you can at that point in time. You have to be very resourceful. And this sounds more forward rather than writing, the crude version of the same term. Of course, it won't change the meaning, but it just sounds a little more crass than writing what the person has written. So always be sensitive to the fact that you're sitting for an exam which is for selection of civil servants. I need to show that gravitas, that civility, that refinedness in the way you write, and it will only come with practice, I will tell you. State impinging on one's personal affair. So again, this point again is generated from point number one. Point number is pro-life versus pro-choice. And as soon as there is an infringement on choice, you can say that now state is impinging on one's personal affairs. So impinging is just another synonym of infringement. It's a matter of vocabulary, and it will only improve with time. But you need to be aware of how to use the same point and contextualize it in a different way. I will tell you, nobody's going to say it out loud. People will tell you that, read a lot of content. Of course, after reading content, how can I write this? Nobody will tell you this. I have learned it the hard way, and it's even more difficult to communicate. But if we are able to nail this down, this will be the best video you're ever going to see. Ideally, I think this will have more returns than watching all the videos on mapping the syllabus, and looking at the content, all of those videos put together. Then you explain state's business is not to engage in morality but in ensuring law and order. Basic standard contextualizing. Uh, you're just generating point number 3 based on the hint from point number 1, and then you're just elaborating. That is how you generate these points. You will never ever find a document which will give you all these points in detail, and even if you find that document, you will never be able to remember it. I assure you, I've been there and I've done that. That is, I can tell you that with confidence. The conclusion says, according to my opinion, because the question was about opinion, what is your opinion? So unless you give your opinion, you have not been able to address the question well. According to my opinion, abortion until a safe window for legitimate reasons is justified to ensure safety and autonomy of the mother. So what is the conclusion? Of course, the context will change. I repeat. So rather than making a note of the entire, conclusion all at once, you need to make a note of the context. What is the context? This person, for one, has taken the madhyamik mark. Ki acha, we will abort, but in certain situations. We won't abort always, but we might abort in certain situations. Or, you know, take one stand with a caveat. This is the takeaway. Simple as that. This is contextualization. MTP, you're using the knowledge from your GS, and then here you're giving legitimate reasons. What could be legitimate reasons? Let's go to the next question.